Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Naalala ko during the pandemic, I was a little bit worried because having 4 children stuck during the lockdown, naisipan ko, am I supposed to keep them busy and how? And naswertihan namin na right before the pandemic, yung mga anak ko, natutunan nila yung nakakatawang sport ng cup stacking. And, you know, they went to North Carolina to compete in the Junior Olympics for cup stacking. At nakapag-pivot yung sport na yon during the pandemic. So what happened was, naging online yung competitions and that helped them go through the lockdown. Ang iniisip ko naman, paano naman lahat na ibang pamilya kung saan pinakagusto ng anak mo is lumabas ng bahay, pinakagusto ng anak mo pumunta ng mall, pinakagusto ng anak mo kumain sa labas, and you can't do that with them. And mas malaking pressure pa is the fact that they couldn't see their friends and interact with them face-to-face. And so alam ko na coming out of the pandemic, a lot of parents, a lot of families are worried. Naging kulang ba yung 2 to 3 years na na-stuck tayo sa bahay? May mga social skills ba tayong nawala? Hindi lang para sa atin, kundi para sa mga anak natin. And today on Insights, I wanted to welcome psychotherapist Elda Almario ng Larô Therapy. Elda, welcome to the show.
Salamat, Ann. Happy to be here.
And you know, yung worry ko na yun, never talagang tuluyang nawala. Although ngayon, pumunta ka ng subway, ng bus, parang walang nangyari. Masiksika na ulit tayo, lahat ng traffic bumalik na. Pero as somebody who knows how the brain works, who knows how certain people at certain ages behave, you know, generally speaking, may nawala ba talaga during those years na nakulong tayo during the pandemic?
Quick answer, Ann, is oo, meron. At tingin ko madami. Unang-una, hindi natin in-expect na mangyayari yung ganun, no? Hindi natin na-anticipate, hindi natin naisip na posible pala yung ganong kalaking pangyayari at pagbabago sa araw-araw na buhay natin. Sa kabiglaan siya nung nangyari, no? Biglang shutdown, lahat sarado, hindi tayo pwedeng lumabas. At kung lalabas man tayo, kailangan naka-masks tayo. So, hindi tayo nakapag-prepare, hindi natin na-anticipate. So, pero biglaan kailangan nating mag-adjust dun sa mga pagbabago na yon. And siguro kasi, lalo na sa mga bata, merong mga opportunity na nawala in terms of pakikipag-socialize sa ibang tao, even sa pagkilos nila o paglalaro sa labas. Pero I also think ginawa natin yung best natin to cope with it. As much as we acknowledge na merong nawala, meron ding na-gain siguro.
Yung gain na yan, na-realize ko nung na-realize ko sa sarili ko, marunong pala ako magluto, marunong pala ako mag-bake, marunong pala ako makipaglaro sa mga anak ko. Yun yung maganda, pero hindi ko rin alam kung sapat na yon or kulang ba. Kasi pagbalik nila ng school, you realize, some of them, it's pretty much they skipped a year. Diba? And kung medyo bata pa, hindi ka masyado nag-aalala. Pag middle school, parang, let's see, right? Tingnan natin yung grades afterwards. Were we worried about the wrong things?
I don't think so. Kasi going back, hindi natin alam eh. Like, what's gonna happen eh. And at the same time, we just had to do what we can. Kasi parang we're acting on, like, this is the first time we're experiencing this. Hindi natin anticipate. We're just acting as we go. And so I also think na we were doing our best. Siguro kulang. Siguro there's more that we could do. Pero based on what we know at the time, it's really all we can do.
I was hoping and praying na ang mga bata, and I hope you can attest to this, mas resilient sila kaysa sa atin. Kasi, di ba, with grown-ups, kung medyo hindi kayo talo ng asawa mo, lagot na. Stuck kayo sa bahay, lalong sumabog yung relationship. Kung mag-best friend kayo, lalo naman nag-grow kasi nagkaroon talaga kayo ng quality time. Ang mga bata, if you change their environment drastically, how well do they bounce back, and how do you know if they are behaving according to how their development is supposed to show?
I'd like to say na oo, mas resilient sila. Pero kasi depende din sa environment nila eh. Depende din sa kung gaano ka-supportive yung magulang nila or yung caregivers nila. So it's, saka also understanding na iba-iba kasi yung mga bata. Right? I think nung panahon ng pandemic, ang pinaka-common theme was, let's lower our expectations. Hindi natin pwedeng iasa sa kanila yung standards na hold natin of them before the pandemic kasi we're all operating differently at that time.
There's so many things that went amiss. There were certain, let's say, grade 8s, hindi sila naka-experience ng class trip, mga ganon. Those things na iniisip natin, ay sayang, walang Kodak moment, di ba? Like, does it really affect the mind of a child? O parang mas, natin yun, parang tayo yun, mas problema about that?
Tingin ko mas tayo.
Okay.
It would have been nicer kung, for example, a graduation ceremony is something na may experience mo in person. At the same time, okay lang. It's recognizing na ito yung part ng buhay natin. Ito yung nangyayari ngayon. It's not desirable, it's not ideal, pero we make do.
So halimbawa, punta tayo sa other side of the pendulum and medyo nababad naman sa devices, right? So yung anak mong bibong-bibo, makulit, masayahin, biglang naisip mo, sandali, parang ako to nung teenager, parang medyo emo yung itsura ng anak ko. Are there certain red flags kung saan, as a parent, kailangan mo aksyonan kagad? Or is it something na, ay sandali, teenager nga naman to. Mahirap gisingin sa umaga. Like, chill lang.
Unang-una yung devices talaga. We need to recognize na in many ways, nakatulong siya to cope. Lalong-lalo sa mga bata, kasi what else is there to do? Whereas from a device, from a gadget, sobrang daming stimulation. Hindi nakakabore, andyan lahat ng colors, andyan lahat ng sounds, and you know how every level gets more difficult as you progress. So stimulation-wise, nakatulong talaga siya to cope. And on the other hand, I get yung question mo na, paano mo malalaman kung too much na? Or paano mo malalaman kung kailangan mo nang i-address o kailangan mo nang magkaroon ng intervention? Siguro you always have to look at the bigger picture. Like, is it getting to a point na hindi na pumapasok sa school, hindi na kumakain, hindi na natutulog, hindi na nakikipag-usap sa ibang tao? You always wanna look at ano yung nawawala? Ano yung hindi na ba nakakapag-function ng maayos? And kung nandun na sa point na yon, then it would make sense to consider, oo nga no, baka kailangan ko nang humingi ng tulong. And again, just going back to like paghingi ng tulong, there's no shame in that. Right?
Ang pinaka napapansin ko sa lahat ng medyo nasosobrahan ng device use, no, sumusungit. Yung kanilang trigger capacity is like konting inis lang, nangahampas na, galit na kagad. How do you explain that? Kasi parang entertain sila eh. Ang saya-saya na lang mag-build, ang saya-saya na lang makapaglaro sa mga pieces nila online. Pero pag sinabi mong, tabi mo muna kakain na tayo, parang inutangan mo na alam na hindi ka magbabayad. Parang gano'n yung attitude nila. So, meron bang explanation when it comes to, how the brain functions?
Siguro, recognize ko din yung disconnect, no? Kasi yung panahon natin, when we were younger, wala pa naman yung mga gadgets na yan eh. So, siguro, even yung formulation from parents, from adults, when we say sobra-sobra naman yung paggamit ng device, that's in comparison to us who did not have access to these devices. Kasi, so, ang hirap i-define ano nga ba yung ibig sabihin ng sobra-sobra. Because if I'm basing it on my own experience, sobra talaga yung use nila. Kasi I did not have any gadgets when I was a child. Right? So, just be mindful of that. Kasi ang hirap sabihin na, nung panahon ko nga, wala namang gadgets nung panahon mo. So, syempre, hindi ka nag-gadget. Right? And then yung question mo on being masungit, being mainitin yung ulo. Ano kasi, if you were to understand, so para sa mga gamers, alam mo yung may mga games na hindi mo pwedeng i-pause?
Yes, I hear about those.
May mga games na sobrang close ka na into defeating siguro the big boss. So it would make sense from their perspective na nakakainit ng ulo if yung parent mo or caregiver mo is expecting na
Patay
you
na.
drop right away.
Yeah.
Right? So, I can understand na may mga adults na hindi naiintindihan yon because they never played those games during their time. So parang feeling ko merong room for collaboration eh. Like, okay, pwede bang pag-usapan natin yung paglalaro, yung game time mo, even before you start the game? Like, how much time do you need? Or being clear with, anong oras ba tayo kakain? So let's say that's at 7 o'clock. So, ang expectation ko is by 7, ready ka na. Right? So when you're around 6:40, like, you should start like slowing down. Or kung malapit na sa 7, huwag ka na mag-start ng next level. Right? So parang merong conversation that needs to happen. And hindi dun sa moment na gusto mo na siyang tumigil. Like even before they start playing, even before sila magkaroon ng privilege to have access to these devices, to play games.
Kasi parang ngayon, kung hindi ka nga marunong makapag-usap ng maayos, parang ikaw pa yun nang hahassle sa kanila. And you're like, excuse me, alam nga naman kita pakainin.
Exactly. So parang ang daming kailangan pag-usapan bago pa sila makahawak ng device, bago pa sila magkaroon ng games. Kailangan clear ka na sa limit setting. Kailangan clear ka na sa boundaries. And then, dun sa time na kailangan mo i-enforce yung limits na yon, you have to be firm and consistent. Kasi that's another challenge for people na parang pag hindi consistent, then the child may think, okay lang naman eh. Right? So, kailangan talaga consistent ka na, food is non-negotiable. Kailangan mo kumain.
It's true. Ang isang worry ko rin is, from a young age, they're so impressionable. So, as grown-ups, as caregivers, ang takot naman natin is to have them exposed dun sa mga hindi naman pala kailangan at their age. With my oldest, talagang walang TV until he was 2, walang gaming device until he was 10. Pero nasira din yan kasi nung by the time binilhan ko siya ng gaming device niya at 10 years old, lahat naman ng malilit niyang kapatid, alangan namang umalis sila ng kwarto or umalis sila ng sala when he's playing, right? So parang medyo nasira din yung plano ko. And I'm thinking, let's get creative and get them to just, either get into sports, more board games. Yung, kumbaga, ang tanong ko is, paano mo masisiguro na tama yung playtime? Or what kind of play? Free play ba? Or is it more, hindi, kailangan structured kagad para yung kanilang pincer grip, maayos. Alam mo, dami kasi natin nababasa, naririnig na kailangan asikasuhin. Nothing short of tayo mismo maging Montessori teachers na.
Ang hirap isipin lahat ng yan. Tapos parang I think yung question mo din is coming from, we want what's best for our children. Tapos with all these content, resources na nababasa natin, naramdaman ko yung pressure na kailangan talaga gawin ko lahat to set my children for success. And siguro, yung pressure na yun, hindi always nakakatulong para sa mga magulang eh. Ang dami ng pressure connected with being a parent. Something I tell parents I work with is, just do your best. Right? Hindi kailangan perfect. Siguro in regards to your question on paano mo malalaman kung anong kailangan play or how much structure is needed. Una, bring up ko ulit yung collaboration. Kasi bawat bata magkakaiba eh. Maybe may bata na mahilig siya sa sports, sa movement, right? Very physical yung type ng play niya. Then you wanna set up things that would match yung interest nila. Right? Okay, gusto nito, enroll ko to sa soccer, right? And to enroll ko to sa sports, right? Maybe may bata na inclined sa music, right? Or maybe may bata na inclined into arts, very much creative siya. So you wanna make sure na it's aligned with their interests. Para kasi it's so important na it's something they enjoy.
So is it safe to say na it's okay to expose them to many things? Yung problema nga lang dun, bigla kang sasabihan ng mga kaibigan mo, you're overscheduling them, right? But you're trying to help them find their path. And so, okay lang ba na talagang formally nire-register mo sila sa maraming bagay, or you just rely on maybe asking them, anong gusto mong gawin?
So, siguro, if you ask them, may mga bata na may sagot. May mga bata na walang sagot. Hindi nila alam.
That's right.
So, it's fair to be trying out different things, right? It doesn't mean gagawin mo siya for a long time. Right? And I understand na people have opinions about it, about your parenting, about your decision making, and that's fair, opinion nila yun. And at the same time, the only opinion that matters here is yours and your child's. Right? There's a constant parang seeking feedback na, nag-e-enjoy ka ba? Napapressure ka ba masyado? Pagod ka na ba? Kasi may mga bata na kaya na at gusto na may activity sila every day. Pero may mga bata din naman na pagod na pagod. Like say someone who's introvert na gusto ko lang magpahinga at gusto ko lang ng alone time, which is also okay. Pero it's really up to us to discover that. Yung personality nila, yung interests nila, and what really makes them happy.
And you know what, tama ka dyan. Kasi as somebody na maraming anak, apat yung anak ko, I'm discovering na yung mga expectations ko sa kanila, kailangan talaga medyo hold back ko ng konti. Basta alam ko they're doing well. Saka nagugulat ako na let's say yung panganay ko, he's very fine without having a big barkada na magulo, na labas ng labas, gastos ng gastos. Parang ako naman parang wow, nung edad ko siya, talagang gusto ko talaga lumabas na ng bahay. Gusto ko mangapit bahay, yung term sa atin, diba? Sa kanya, okay lang. Like, he's very happy with just a couple of friends, really close friends. Tapos yun na. And ako naman, sa ko sandali, baka naman masyadong introverted na. So there's so many things na yung over-worrying. And I know na there are a lot of parents na they can't even bridge that gap of communication. At kung saan they're trying everything and then they all get one-word answers, I'm fine. Good. Meron nga ako nakitang meme na pagkausap mo raw yung pre-teen mo, yung teenager mo, it's like trying to talk to a guy who's not interested in you. Parang ganun yung usapan niya, parang, I love you, okay. Did you eat yet? Yeah. Are you hungry? No.
Alam mo, gusto ko i-point out yung parenting natin, nakabase din talaga sa kung paano tayo pinarent ng magulang natin. Right?
Ito na.
And in you saying na, parang itong anak ko, hindi masyado mahilig mag-socialize. Teka, nung ako, at that age, kasi ang reference mo talaga yung sarili mong lived experience eh. So parang, kailangan din nating, I guess kailangan meron tayong enough humility to trust na yung anak natin, they're their own person. They're not mini us, right? Meron silang sariling personality, meron silang sariling preferences, and so hindi nating pwedeng i-hold yung sarili nating preferences at personality as the standard na ganito ako kaya dapat ganito ka rin. Because it's not gonna work out. Kasi hindi yun sila. Right? Yeah.
And kung halimbawa, meron tayong mga parents na feeling nila talaga kailangan nila ng tulong. And especially with, number one, communicating with their kid. Anong mang age yan? Or number two, maybe the kid is exhibiting behaviors na hindi naintindihan ng parents na parang, ay, bakit ganun? Bakit lagi itong nambubugbog ng kaklas? Diba? It can be something na out of the ordinary. Pag-usapan natin yung steps to, halimbawa, preparing the child na magkaroon ng third-party, I wouldn't call it intervention, pero at least third-party help, katulad mo, psychotherapist. When do you think you should come into play? Into play. And ano dapat ang expectation ng magulang na, let's face it, nung panahon natin, hindi talaga normal yung, wait, we have an appointment with our therapist. Di ba? Kung marinig natin to, parang, bakit? Ano problema? Di ba? Parang, parang squirrel, ano nangyari? Pero ngayon, naintindihan natin na meron talaga mga kaso kung saan mas mabuti sa well-being ng bata, sa mental health, maybe ng parents na rin, to actually have someone take a look at the development of the child and maybe give an opinion. So,
alam mo yung sagot ko dito, ita-tailor ko sa community natin.
Sige.
Recognizing na, yun nga, may stigma pa rin talaga around mental health and accessing support for mental health. Right? So, kung masyadong nakakatakot, nakaka-intimidate to seek professional help, let's start with yung community natin. Right? Even expressing yung challenges mo, may makaka-relate at makaka-relate. Right? And maybe meron dun makakatulong within your community that can point you to the right direction or can start giving you advices that can work out with them that you can try. Right? Andyan din, alam ko, we're a very religious community, no? So, community, church groups, teachers. Right? That's a good starting point. Right? Kung hindi pa rin sapat, kung pakiramdam pa rin natin we need more than that, then we can start with a family doctor or a therapist like me. Right? And pag dinala sa therapist, ayun nga no, ang daming stigma na kailangan nating i-address You're right, sobrang napapansin ko tong fear na mag-seek ng help para sa mental health kasi ang magiging impression is something's wrong with my child. Or maaapektuhan na yung future na.
Akala mo criminal record.
This will be on the record and baka magkaroon ng impact sa employment opportunities nila in the future. And this is just all not correct. So let's just straighten the facts na hindi ganon. That is not the case. In fact, when someone is seeking help, the way we look at it is, wow, this is a person who is aware of their challenges. This is a person na may insight na, alam nila yung nasa point na sila na kailangan ko na ng tulong. Right? And there's no shame in that. In fact, there's so much courage, diba, that comes with recognizing na kailangan mo ng tulong and actually seeking help.
Medyo technical to pero kailangan ba ng consent ng both parents to actually bring in a child to see you, let's say?
So in Ontario, walang age of consent. Right? And yet, it's the professional's responsibility to assess whether the child is able to consent. Right? So, ang ability to consent depends on kung naiintindihan ba nila what treatment they're seeking, ano yung benefits saka risks ng treatment na yon, and if they're able to appreciate yung benefits ng treatment. Right? So, kung kayang i-establish yon ng professional, then actually they don't need the consent of the parents. Right? Pero kung medyo hindi sigurado, it's always best practice to get the consent of the parents. In fact, hindi lang consent ng parents, involvement of the parents.
Ooh, okay. So, tell us a little bit about that. Na what happens during a typical session? So, let's say 6-year-old, right, displaying really weird behavior either to friends or classmates and whatnot, and then they bring the child in. During the session ba, ganun ba, andun pareho yung parents, what happens kasi ang alam ko lang is kung ano nakikita ko sa TV. Hindi ko naman alam kung paniniwalaan ko yun.
Yeah. So, involvement ng parents, I just wanna say na when you're working with kids, kailangan involved yung parents or caregivers. Kasi what I always say is, siguro I can see the child once a week, once every 2 weeks for an hour. But at the end of the day, sa bahay niyo sila buuwi. So you really have more opportunity to address yung challenging concerns, right? And in terms of what does it look like? So typically, it would start with yung first session. Depende sa style ng therapist, I would say. But personally, I'd like to have the parents come in so we can gather information. How are things looking like? Ano ba yung mga challenges? Saan present ang challenges? Sa bahay lang ba? Sa school lang ba? Both? Right? Also, I'd be curious, ano yung mga nangyari in the past? Like, kailan nag-start tong challenging behaviors? And also, how have you been responding to these challenging behaviors? When you respond, how does the child then respond? Like, what's working, what's not working? So, ang daming, essentially, like, information gathering, no? Like, with the intent na, I want to get to know the child better. I want to get to know the family better. Kasi also something important to keep in mind. When you're working with a child, you're working with systems. Right? A child never acts in isolation, right? It makes me think about, okay, meron ba siyang mga behaviors na na-observe na akala niya tama, na akala niya okay lang gawin. And so, in understanding the system, yung buong ecosystem ng bata, alam mo din, makakapag-formulate ka ng tamang intervention or ng tamang treatment plan. And oftentimes, hindi lang yan intervention para sa bata.
Yun na nga
Oftentimes, intervention yan para sa family.
I'm thinking kasi, either of the two Pangatlo, kunwari, kalmado. Pero yung dalawang type na hinuhulaan ko na approach ng parents is, it's either sumbungero sila, na parang, itong anak ko, ganyan. Or guarded. Alam mo, matalino yan eh. Pero, may mali. Pero alam mo, mahusay. So parang, as the parent naman, what can you advise before they bring in the kid or the kids? Ano dapat yung state of mind nila? How should they be reading their kid? How should they be preparing themselves first? Kasi nga sa kanila mga gala information, hindi mo naman hulaan ano yung personality ng anak nila, diba? So the information is going to come from them, which is tricky for you. Kasi syempre, babasahin mo muna yung mom and dad bago mo kilalanin yung bata. So, anong advice mo sa parents who are thinking of, okay, maybe it's time for my kid to see Elda, pero anong kailangan namin?
Very good question. And sobra akong nakaka-relate sa mga examples mo about some parents being so guarded. Sobrang common yan. And siguro, as a professional, being in the field for many years, it's something na sanay na din ako and I already know at this point how to navigate, right? Sobrang good question yung, okay, ano ba yung kailangan namin i-prepare when we're going to therapy? Paperwork. Kung merong paperwork, let's say may formal diagnosis, it would be good for me to have access to those files para additional background information for me. Usually naman, I am able to guide the parents with questions, right? So yun nga, yung mga na-bring up ko kanina, like ano yung mga nagiging challenges, saan nag-show up itong mga challenging behaviors. Usually then, as much as I gather information from the parents, nagagather din ako ng information from the child. And kung may discrepancy sa observation ko or what these two parties are saying, then I'm also able to formulate based on that discrepancy. Right? It's not like sa isang tao lang ako nagre-refer, right? Minsan, part of the work then is getting an interview or asking the teachers to complete a questionnaire. Right? That's another way to gather information. So, in that way, I can see kung ano yung pattern and kung ano yung consistent among what people are saying. Right? I think for parents lang, ang encouragement ko lang is just be as open as possible. Because the only way I can help you is if you bring things on the table transparently. Like, I'm not here to judge you. Right? In fact, the more you can bring, mas madami tayong magagawa. Right? And minsan, it's easier said than done. Napapansin ko. Like, I can say, walang judgment dito, open up nyo lang kung ano yung mga problema. Pero minsan talaga, it takes time to develop that relationship with the parents, with the client. And okay lang yun. Parang kahit anong relationship, di ba? Pag bago mong kilala, stranger yan eh. Right? So, minsan it takes a few sessions bago nila maramdaman, bago nila ma-feel na, okay, safe nga tong taong to. Hindi nga tayo inuhusgahan ng taong to. And from my end, as a professional, I really have to be mindful kung paano ako nagre-respond sa mga sinasabi ng clients or the families that I work with.
Magbas tayo ng some myths, no? So, isang takot ng mga tao kaya hindi nila welcome yung concept na baka kailangan ng therapy ng anak ko is, first of all, isipin nila, sandali, baka kaya ko namang isolve to sa bahay. Una-una, parang, kayanin ko, ano ba tingin ng tita ko? Ano bang ganon, diba? So, laging, tama, I mean, reaching out to the community, pero, it's that assumption na, kahit ano man yan, kakayanin. Kahit ano man yan. Pangalawa, ang takot nila is, they see you. Iniisip nila, naku, pag lumabas yan, baka mamaya malabelan na. ADD, ADHD, may learning disability, eto na. Naku, baka naman mag-recommend na, baka kailangan ng gamot. Ayoko namang ilagay, yung gano'n na takot. So, ano dapat ang i-expect nila in terms of what may be the outcome? Right? Ang takot nila is yun nga, malabelan, hindi force or hindi mandatory, pero ma-recommend na i-medicate. Takot ng mga magulang yan. Di kasi nila alam kung kailan talaga dapat, di ba? Pangatlo, totoo ba yun? Binas mo na yung myth na yun na hindi siya parang criminal record na. Ay, juvie! Yes. Pwede mag-work. Ganyan. So, ano pa ba? Or ano yung dapat na isipin ng mga parents when it comes to therapy and the youth?
So, pagdating dun sa outcomes, I guess naiintindihan ko yung takot, right? Whether that's towards medications, towards being labeled, pero bilang professional, part ng trabaho namin is to understand saan nanggagaling tong fears na to, right? Because ang gusto namin, makagawa kayo ng informed decisions, right? Kung ang medication ay makakatulong talaga, at kung ang medication ay merong side effects, we want to explain that to you. We want you to understand and decide. Kasi there is always the option of not taking medication. Pero not taking medication has risks and benefits. Taking medication has risks and benefits as well. Right? So it's not like nakakaiwas ka sa risks by not making decisions. Right? And trabaho namin is to respect kung ano man yung maging decision mo. Pero yung decision mo needs to be informed. Ayun. So, wala namang part ng treatment na we will force on clients, we will force on family. We always try to understand saan sila nanggagaling, ano yung paniniwala nila. And siguro, ito din kaya important yung merong therapist o professional na nakakaintindi ng culture natin or even speaks the language. Kasi, isa yun sa pinakamalaking ways para maramdaman ng clients na, naiintindihan ako nitong therapist ko. Hindi, versus pinipilit ko yung opinion ko over them.
Do you also teach parents how to use their words? Parang bata no? Pero, kasi dati, halimbawa, sa generation ko, bago ako umasta ng mali, at nararamdaman na ng parents ko, makita ko lang yung tsinelas na medyo, sige, subukan mo. I mean, it's material for stand-up comics and tinatawanan natin. And in the back of our mind, actually, papaluin ko yung anak ko pag talaga yun tigas sa ulo. Kasi sometimes, sumisigaw na, nagwawala na, feeling mo yun talaga yung solusyon. I know you deal mostly with the children, pero do you actually teach the parents then how to communicate better, how to use more helpful words instead of puro ultimatum, puro threat, puro Batman voice, puro nalilisik ang mata na, you know what, it's funny, but if you're in that situation at that particular moment, feeling mo, you know, you're pulling out your hair kasi mahirap talaga minsan.
Yeah, and earlier nasabi ko na it's rarely pag ang bata dinala sa therapy that it's only the child that needs intervention. Very, very rarely. Right? Often, kailangan din talaga ng support ng parents. And so, ayun din, hindi lang consent ng parents yung kailangan ko, yung involvement ng parents yung kailangan ko if we want best outcomes ng therapy. Kasi sabi ko nga, kasama ko yung bata 1 hour once a week at most, pero most of their time, they're spending with you. So kahit ano pang gawin natin dito sa 1 hour na to, if the same things happen at home and or at school, then it's going to be the same challenges. So sobrang critical yung part na yan of the work. It's really more than feedback about the treatment na nangyayari. It's also, okay, what about you? Paano kayo nagre-respond dun sa behaviors ng bata? And ano yung pwede nating baguhin for this to be better? Ang daming parenting skills, communication skills na natuturo in the context of therapy, for sure.
Yung common na, pag nag-stereotype tayo ng panganay, pangalawa, pangatlo, pangapat, you know, they say kapag panganay, level-headed, mas better decision maker. Yung pangalawa, pabida, kasi medyo hindi mo pinakikinggan, pero magaling palang ulo. Yung pangatlo, lagi nagpapatawa, medyo burara, komedyante. Yung pang-apat, laging sobrang vocal na boisterous kasi halos di mo na napapansin. So, talagang niname ko na lahat ng apat na anak ko. No? So, as somebody who knows the developmental stages of children, meron ba tayong dapat na proactivity as parents para naman mabalanse? Kasi kapag hinayaan ba natin, do they really fall into these four stereotypes for these categories, or baka dapat i-encourage natin yung talaga totoong personality nila to shine.
I think itong stereotypes, these are themes. Hindi naman siya parang general rule na ganun talaga lahat. I still think there's room for them coming out of their shell, learning more about who they really are. As much as siguro merong tendency based on the placement, yung order nila of birth, hindi siya ultimate, right? It can't be solely determined by that, right?
Ikaw ba lagi mahusay ka makapag-usap sa bata? I mean, how did you get into this field? Kasi, okay, pag tumingin ka sa mga kindergarten teachers, ikaw naman, paano niya napapatulog itong mga to? Paano sila nakikinig? Like, paano niya napapatahimik yung class? So it's a calling, it's a wonder to watch professionals that are really good, working with kids. Ikaw, paano ka napasok sa industriya na to? Kasi I wanted to also inspire our community members if they think they have the skill set, the capacity to really understand how the mind works, how behavior works, and everything that goes with it. Plus, they love kids. They think, ito talaga ang future natin. Let's try, get it right. Kwento mo naman sa amin yung journey mo.
I love this conversation. Kasi gusto ko din talaga, like you, gusto ko din talaga to encourage a lot of like Filipinos in the community to get into the mental health field kasi sobrang taas ng need. Right? Well, going back from the start, siguro I really got into the field of psychology kasi growing up, I have an autistic brother who I'm very close with. And even as a child, parati ko siyang inoobserbahan. Bakit kakaiba yung behavior niya? Nagla-line up siya ng Legos. Pag na-move mo ng konti yung Lego, he'll throw a tantrum. Tapos meron siyang mga behaviors na later on na-realize ko na self-stimulatory behaviors. Pero as a child, I really started getting curious. Bakit siya iba? Bakit hindi siya tulad ng the rest of us? Right? And that's where it started, na parang, bawat tao pala, iba-iba yung personality, iba-iba yung behavior. I was so curious to learn more about autism, per se. And that led me to a career in psychology. Nung una pa nga, I was very much into the special education sector as well. Kasi yun nga, autism, ADHD, yan yung initial field ko. But later on, taking my master's in developmental psychology, having worked with addictions, eto na parang lumaki yung mundo ko in terms of yung differences natin as people and how our brain works. Yung personalities natin magkakaiba. So parang feeling ko ang starting point talaga is curiosity. Right? And then, later on, sobrang drawn ako to children. Right? Kasi sobrang nakikita ko yung innocence, yung purity, like sobra nilang generous. Pag nagkamali ako, okay lang yan, Tita Elda. Gawin na lang natin ulit. Like sobrang raw. Yan. And in awe ako of that, yung sense of wonder nila sa mundo. And that's really something na I feel I've connected to. They really make me humble. Ba? Na parang, okay lang to, parang tanggap ka nila for who you are is constantly what I'm feeling from them.
And at this point in your career, what are you trying to accomplish next? Kasi halimbawa, yun nga, inumpisahan natin tong show na ako reeling from the pandemic. and everything that came with that. Napansin ko between that point and right now, as a society, akala mo okay na eh. Pero alam mo may remnants ng pagkagulo ng isip natin, yung pagka nawala talaga tayo. And I just wanted to make sure na no one's gonna fall through the cracks. Because people already have. As grown-ups, may kita mo, sometimes they can't even, survive, right? And they choose not to survive and not continue on. And I just don't want that sense of hopelessness to creep into the minds of the youth. Kasi during our time, what we consume is literally kung ano bang subscription ng parents natin. May Reader's Digest, yun ang kinukonsume natin. May Pambata Magazine, yun ang kinukonsume. May TV, yan. Pero right now, it's so open that it's a little bit jarring. It's a little scary. Lalo na yung mga tipong YouTube shorts na hindi mo monitor. Kahit uninstall mo, grade 2, marunong mag-install ulit sa telepono. You know, like sometimes you just feel a little bit helpless. But I just don't want people to have that hopelessness. Kasi feeling ko talaga, pag yun ang naramdaman mo, halos too late. Diba?
Oo.
So, nangyayari ba yun? Yung very scary thing na ganun, sense of hopelessness sa mga bata? And are there like red flags or signs na, ay sandali, hindi ko na kaya to, kailangan ko dalhin?
Unfortunately, oo, nangyayari siya. No? And pag dumating na sa point na yon, I mean, ideally, we already have supports in place to help them, right? The thing is, just around mental health, ang dami nangyayari sa mundo. Ang dami nangyayari sa mundo, sa mga pamilya natin. Makakaranas tayo ng sakit, ng death, a traumatic incident. And just because of this, yung mental health challenges will be there. Right? Hindi dadating yung point na we are 100% okay, 100% all the time. Right? And we're humans. That is part of like the human experience. From time to time, we will be okay, and then there are times na we will need some help, right? Siguro yung pagdating dun sa hopelessness, especially like it's so dark when, in my experience, when I hear about a child going through that, ang bigat. Kasi you'd like to think na ang bata, naglalaro lang yan wala yung problema. Carefree lang yan sila. So when you hear something like that, sobrang bigat nung story na yon. And ideally, and part of my work is supporting parents, okay, what do we do? What can we do? Right? Andyan yung safety planning. Right? Paano ba natin mabibuild yung structure around how do we make the child comfortable to open up to you? It's easy to say, pag may problema ka, sabihin mo lang sa akin Pero my question to parents is, nung may problema ba siya, nakinig ka ba? O sinabihan mo lang siya na ang arte mo naman, yun lang O sinabihan mo siya na ang tamad-tamad mo, ayaw mo bumangon. Like, paano natin mabibuild yung capacity within us as adults, as parents, to listen and to actually hold space for children na merong pinagdadaanan na sobrang bigat. It's really, that's yung skill, yung capacity na we also really try to strengthen in therapy.
Are there resources na gusto mong i-refer to our viewers in the community? Kasi syempre, ito yung pagpalit mo ng mga words mo na, yun nga, ang dali-daling sabihin, arte mo naman. Parang, di ba, iniisip mo na, well, it doesn't hurt me. Kapag sinabihan ako naman po ng arte mo naman, maasar ka, pero you're like, okay, fine. Maybe I'll pivot. Pero hindi mo basta-basta pwedeng bitiwan the same words na intergenerational na. Di ba? Na, because of you, naintindihan tuloy nila yung ibig sabihin ng maarte. And it's such a negative way of just shutting them down, right? So, when it comes to maybe changing our words, meron ka bang mga favorite references or resource materials na maybe we can look up?
I would say, so the first resource that comes to mind is in times of mental health crisis, there's a hotline. So, kumbaga, 911 for emergencies, right? For mental health emergencies, there's 988 that people can really look up. It's 24/7, available all the time, that they can really call, and they will get, someone will respond, not trained, to really respond to mental health emergencies. Right? Ang daming resources online kasi on one hand, naisip ko, balik tayo dun sa nakaka-overwhelm. Sobrang daming resources, nakaka-overwhelm. Alin yung susundin ko?
Saka di mo naman mamememorize din lahat.
Exactly. Tapos again, yung pressure na kailangan I do it right. So siguro gusto ko lang din i-recognize na we're still very much in process of healing. Not to blame our parents or our grandparents kasi yun din yung alam nila based on kung ano yung pinasa din sa kanila. Right? But being adults now, I think we have the opportunity to challenge those patterns na, teka, nung bata ako, pinapalo ako. Nakatulong ba sa akin yun? It doesn't give me the right na mamalo din. Kasi pinalo din ako eh. Like, meron tayong opportunity para mag-isip, actually, hindi nakatulong sa akin. Actually, ang nangyari sa akin is sobra akong natakot. So, ayoko siyang gawin. So, madaming parenting patterns na we can review and really reflect on and think, gusto ko ba tong ipasa sa next generation? And if not, how can I do this differently? And that's something that will be different for every person, for every family, and needs to be collaboration, pag-usapan natin. Anak, nahihirapan talaga ako pag hindi kita nasasaway. Ano bang pwede natin gawin? Let's have a conversation about it, especially for older kids, no? Lalo when they're wanting some sense of autonomy and some sense of independence in how they're living their lives. Siguro gusto ko din magsabi ng ibang words on responding to a child seeking support. Right? Ang initial response ng parent is, and I empathize with parents, ayokong nakikitang nasasaktan yung anak ko. Ayokong nakikitang umiiyak yung anak ko. Pag binuli yung anak ko, galit na galit ako. And yet, minsan, yung nagiging nasasabi natin becomes invalidating. Hayaan mo na lang, wag mo na isipin yun. And that speaks to yung discomfort ko with the pain that my child is experiencing. Ang hirap dalhin. Ang hirap dalhin. So actually, yung strength na yun is something na kailangan natin i-model. Okay? Good intentions. We're coming from the best intentions. Gusto natin hindi nasasaktan yung anak natin. And the truth is, nasasaktan sila. And sometimes, wala tayong magagawa to take it all away. Okay? Sometimes what we can do is just to see, talaga, anak, nangyari yun sa school. I'm so sorry to hear that. Paano kita matutulungan ngayon? Kailangan mo ba ng hug? Dito lang ako sa tabi mo. Versus, wag mo isipin yun. Right? So even just yung act of listening and seeing their pain, their struggle, is enough. Kasi hindi na nila mararamdaman na nag-iisa lang sila, na kailangan nilang itago yung pains nila at struggles nila.
Diba? Parang inisip natin, breaking news. Kahit emotions ng bata, valid.
Exactly.
You know, during this time of healing, tayo mga grown-ups, gusto natin to be seen, right? We want to be recognized. We want to be bigyan ng konting affirmation. Di ba? Una-uhaw tayo dahil pinagdaanan natin ang pandemic. At kahit normal na ngayon, kailangan pa rin natin yan. Huwag natin kalimutan that our kids are the same thing. They're human beings. They're their own people. Right? So, hindi natin pwedeng ipasa lahat ng mga hindi talaga nag-serve sa mga pamilya natin, sa kultura natin. And if we want more information at tulong, at you know what, you just want to have conversation because she's an amazing gal. Follow nyo lang si Elda Almario at Larô Therapy sa Instagram, and I'm pretty sure na, you know, she's all over the internet. Pero maraming salamat, Elda, and I hope to have you back on our show because we need more of this ability to communicate with the best human beings on earth, the future of this world. Maraming salamat, at next time, magkita-kita ulit tayo sa Insights.